Blind girl reunites with her missing guide dog after 7 years. His reaction is heartwarming. Tears streamed down Margaret's face as she hugged her youngest grandson. Little Ethan kept asking why Aunt Emily never looked directly at him when they talked, and his grandmother struggled to find the right words to explain the young woman's condition. Just then, a familiar bark echoed through the backyard. Emily, who was sitting on the porch with her inseparable cane, jolted to her feet. Her ears, trained by years without sight, instantly recognized the sound that had lived only in her memories and dreams for 7 long years. "It can't be," she murmured, her heart racing. The sound of paws against the dirt grew closer, and, before anyone could say a word, the black Labrador stood before her, panting and wagging his tail with an intensity that seemed to make up for all the lost time. Emily Parker's story began on a sunny March Sunday in the small town of Greenfield in the heart of California. At just 10 years old, the red-haired, freckle-faced girl ran freely through her grandmother Margaret's yard. Margaret, a traditional 72-year-old woman, held onto the values of a time when family protection came above all else. "Emily, don't run so fast, you'll hurt yourself," Margaret called from the kitchen window as she prepared Sunday lunch. "Just a little longer, Grandma. I'm trying to catch the leaves before they hit the ground," the girl replied, laughing and spinning with her arms outstretched beneath a large mango tree. Jennifer, Emily's mother and Margaret's only daughter, watched the scene with a smile. She was a literature teacher at a public school and had divorced Michael, Emily's father, 3 years earlier. Their marriage had crumbled under the weight of his constant absences. He was a talented musician, but incapable of settling down. Michael traveled the country with his jazz band, chasing a dream that always seemed just one contract away. Jennifer had endured the loneliness for years, but when Emily was born, Michael's absence became even more painful. "She has your smile," Michael had said during his last visit 3 months ago, watching his daughter run through the garden. "And your talent for forgetting commitments," Jennifer replied, unable to hide the resentment in her voice. "You missed her school performance. Again." Michael lowered his eyes, unable to defend himself. He loved his daughter, but the call of the stage always spoke louder. His visits grew rarer, just a few times a year, always filled with expensive gifts that tried to make up for his absence but never could. "Let her be, Mom. Emily needs this freedom. You were always so overprotective with me, and I don't want her growing up afraid of the world," Jennifer said, taking a sip of juice. Margaret sighed, wiping her hands on her apron. "The world is dangerous, dear. One day you'll understand that everything I do is out of love." At that moment, a scream cut through the air. Emily had tripped over an exposed root of the old mango tree and fallen hard. Her head struck an ornamental rock in Margaret's garden, and the impact was so strong that the girl blacked out instantly. "My God, Emily!" Jennifer cried, rushing toward her fallen daughter. Margaret dropped everything in the kitchen, the dishcloth floating to the ground like a forgotten leaf as her elderly feet moved with surprising speed across the yard. Her heart pounded violently in her chest. She had warned them so many times about the dangers of running carelessly. Why did no one ever listen to her advice? "Don't move her!" Margaret ordered when she saw Jennifer about to lift the girl. "She could have hurt her spine." Jennifer froze, her hands trembling inches above her daughter's motionless body. A small pool of blood was beginning to form beneath Emily's red hair. Time seemed to crawl as they waited for the ambulance, each second stretching into hours. Margaret held her granddaughter's small, fragile hand between her own, wrinkled with age, praying fervently in silence, making promises to every saint she knew. The hours that followed were pure anguish. At the regional medical center, doctors ran numerous tests while the family waited in despair. When the neurologist finally appeared in the hallway, his grave expression foretold news that would forever change that family's life. "Mrs. Jennifer, the tests show the trauma caused damage to Emily's optic nerve. Unfortunately, she shows signs of a condition called traumatic optic neuritis, which may lead to progressive vision loss." "Vision loss?" Jennifer repeated, as if the words made no sense. "You mean my daughter will be blind?" the doctor finished regretfully. "Yes, the tests indicate the loss will be progressive and possibly complete within the next few months. I'm very sorry." Margaret covered. Her mouth with her hands as silent tears streamed down her wrinkled face. A deep sense of guilt washed over her. If only she had insisted more that Emily not run, maybe this would never have happened. "Doctor, there must be something we can do. Treatments, specialists," Jennifer pleaded. "We'll do everything within our power, but you must understand. You'll need to prepare to help Emily adapt to a new reality. She'll need to learn Braille, use a cane, and possibly consider a guide dog." The doctor hesitated, observing the pale faces before him, then continued more gently. "You should also consider psychological support, not just for Emily, but for the whole family. The adjustment process will be challenging for everyone." Jennifer nodded mechanically, unable to fully process what she was hearing. How would she explain this to her daughter? How could she tell a 10-year-old that her world of colors and shapes would disappear forever? That night, when Emily finally woke in her hospital bed, her first question shattered everyone's hearts. "Why is it so dark, Mom? Why won't they turn on the lights?" Jennifer swallowed the lump in her throat and held her daughter's hand. "Emily, sweetheart, there was an accident. You hit your head very hard and—" Her voice faltered. "And what, Mom? Why can't I see right? There's a fog in front of my eyes." It was the doctor who took on the difficult task of explaining, using simple, direct words a child could understand. He spoke about the optic nerve, how Emily's vision would gradually blur until it disappeared completely. Emily's first reaction was confusion, then denial. "But it'll get better, won't it? Tomorrow I'll see better, right?" The painful silence that followed was answer enough. Emily squeezed her eyes shut, as if trying to hold on to the last images she could still make out, and cried until she fell asleep again in her mother's arms. Dear listener, if you're enjoying the story, don't forget to like and especially subscribe to the channel. It helps us a lot as we're just starting out. Now, continuing. The months that followed were the hardest Emily had ever faced. Day after day, her vision faded, as if a thicker and thicker fog formed before her eyes. Colors were the first to go, followed by shapes and outlines. By the end of 6 months, only shadows and very bright lights remained until finally, darkness became her constant companion. Jennifer transformed her life to help her daughter. She reduced her teaching hours and dedicated herself to researching every possibility to provide the best possible quality of life for Emily. It was during her research that she found information about a special guide dog project for children developed in Portland. "I don't think it's a good idea," Margaret said when Jennifer mentioned the possibility. "Emily needs to learn to be independent with her cane. A dog will make her dependent on another living being." "Mom, it's not just about mobility. Emily is depressed, isolated. A dog can bring back the joy she lost," Jennifer argued. After much discussion and against Margaret's wishes, Jennifer contacted the Guide Dog Institute, and after undergoing a rigorous evaluation and initial training, the family was selected to receive one of the specially trained animals. It was on a September afternoon, exactly 1 year after the accident, that shadow came into Emily's life. A black Labrador with a shiny coat and attentive brown eyes, specially trained to assist children with visual impairments. The instructor explained that Shadow had been chosen for his extremely gentle and patient temperament, essential traits for working with children. "Emily, this is Shadow. He's here to be your eyes," Jennifer said, guiding her daughter's hand to the dog's wet nose. The girl, who had barely smiled in months, felt the dog gently lick her hand, and for the first time since the accident, her face lit up. "Hi, Shadow," she whispered, stroking the Labrador's head. The instructor, Robert Johnson, a man in his 40s with over 2 decades dedicated to training guide dogs, patiently explained how the partnership between Emily and Shadow would work. "He's trained to be your eyes, Emily, but you need to learn to be his legs and voice. It's a two-way street," Robert explained, placing the special harness in Emily's hand. "Over time, you'll develop your own language. He'll understand your needs just by the tone of your voice, and you'll learn what he's trying to show you through the pressure on the harness or the sound of his breathing." For 2 weeks, Robert visited the house daily, teaching Emily the basic commands and helping her establish a routine with Shadow. The progress was remarkable. Emily, who had once been reluctant to leave her room, now looked forward to practicing. Walks around the neighborhood with her new companion. "He never lets me bump into anything, Mum," Emily marveled after returning from a walk around the block. "It's like he thinks a few steps ahead and warns me before danger even appears." The bond between them grew stronger each day. Shadow showed an impressive sensitivity to Emily's emotional needs, beyond his guiding duties. When the girl woke in the middle of the night, frightened by the permanent darkness that was now her reality, the Labrador would immediately rest his head on her lap, offering silent comfort until she fell back asleep. "I've never seen a dog adapt so quickly to a child," Robert remarked during his final visit. "It's like they were made for each other." The days that followed brought a remarkable transformation. Emily began moving around the house with more confidence, always with Shadow by her side. The dog had been trained not only to guide her, but also to find objects, alert her to obstacles, and even fetch help if needed. "He's my eyes, Mum," Emily would often say, her face radiant as she hugged the Labrador's neck. Jennifer watched with emotion as her daughter gradually regained her joy for life. Shadow slept in Emily's room, always beside her bed, alert to her every need throughout the night. The connection between the two was almost magical to witness. Margaret, however, watched everything with growing concern. During her frequent visits, she noticed how Emily seemed to rely more and more on the dog for everything. "She doesn't even try to use her cane anymore, Jennifer," she remarked one afternoon as her daughter prepared coffee. "How will she manage if something happens to that dog?" "That's ridiculous, Mom. Shadow is young and healthy. He'll be with Emily for many years." "Nothing lasts forever, dear. We're creating a dangerous dependence. Emily needs to learn to manage on her own too." Jennifer ignored her mother's worries, focusing instead on the improvements she saw in her daughter. Emily had returned to school, now adapted to her needs, and with Shadow's support, she was slowly regaining her independence. Teachers reported her active participation in class, and gradually the children who had initially kept their distance, unsure how to interact with their classmates' new condition, began including her in their games again. Life was adjusting to this new reality until a routine medical checkup changed the course of history. Emily needed follow-up eye exams, and Margaret offered to take her to the doctor since Jennifer had an important meeting at school. "Shadow can wait outside in the lobby while I examine Emily," the doctor said, pointing to a chair for the girl. "No, he needs to stay with me," Emily protested, gripping the dog's leash. "Sweetheart, it'll just be a few minutes. Grandma is right here with you," Margaret intervened, gently prying her granddaughter's hand from the leash. Reluctantly, Emily went into the exam room while Margaret stayed in the waiting area with Shadow. The dog sat obediently, but his eyes never left the door where his young companion had disappeared. It was then that fate, in the form of a couple, who had just entered the clinic, changed everything. They were discussing how hard it was to find a trained guide dog for their son, who had recently lost his sight due to a degenerative disease. "Look, a guide dog," the woman remarked, noticing Shadow. "They're so hard to come by, the waiting list is enormous." Margaret, holding Shadow's leash, felt an impulse she would later justify as being for Emily's own good. A thought took hold. Her granddaughter was becoming completely dependent on that animal, and it was preventing her from developing other essential skills. Besides, there was another young boy who desperately needed a guide dog and might not have time to wait. "Excuse me," Margaret said, approaching the couple. "I couldn't help overhearing. This dog, he's a trained guide dog." "He's wonderful," the man said. "You're lucky to have gotten one." Margaret took a deep breath, making a decision that would change all their lives. I might consider giving him to you, for your son." The couple stared at her, in shock. "Are you serious? But what about the person he's with?" "My granddaughter. She's developing a dangerous dependence on him. The doctors think she needs to rely more on her cane, develop her other senses." The lies slipped easily from Margaret's lips, justified in her mind by what she believed was best for Emily in the long run. The conversation that followed was quick and discreet. The couple, David and Susan Cooper, were passing through town from San Diego. Their 12-year-old son, Ethan, had lost his sight just 6 months earlier, and the adjustment had been extremely difficult. The waiting list for a guide dog was nearly 2 years. "We can't just accept," Susan hesitated, though her eyes remained fixed on Shadow. "Consider it a gift. A way to help another child who's suffering," insisted Margaret, ignoring the weight of remorse already settling in her chest. David, after exchanging glances with his wife, offered a sum of money, but Margaret refused. "Just promise to take good care of him." Susan opened her purse and took out a business card. "We're architects. We have an office in San Diego. If you change your mind or want news about him, you can contact us." Margaret took the card, mechanically, without looking at it, and stuffed it into her bag. She knew she would never call, that this card would be a constant reminder of her impulsive decision, of her betrayal of her granddaughter's trust. In a matter of minutes, an agreement was made. The couple agreed to take Shadow immediately, before Emily even finished her appointment. Margaret handed over the leash, the dog's vaccination records, and some basic instructions about his commands. Shadow seemed confused by the sudden change. When David took hold of his leash, the dog kept looking back at the office door, as if expecting Emily to appear at any moment. Even though he was trained to be obedient, he resisted slightly as they tried to lead him out of the clinic. "He's very attached to your granddaughter, isn't he?" David observed, sensing the dog's reluctance. "Yes, they're inseparable," Margaret replied, her voice breaking as she admitted what made her actions even crueler. "Maybe we should reconsider," Susan began, noticing the dog's discomfort. "No," Margaret interrupted more sharply than she intended. "I mean, it'll be better this way. He just needs time to adjust. We all do." With gentle words and kindness, David finally managed to persuade Shadow to go with them. The last look the Labrador cast backward, toward the clinic door, would be etched in Margaret's memory forever. His brown eyes, confused and almost human in their expression of bewilderment and abandonment. "And what will you tell your granddaughter?" Susan asked, visibly uneasy about the situation despite her desire to help her son. "I'll say he ran away. It'll be hard at first, but in time she'll get over it and become more independent. It's for her own good." When Emily came out of the office, Margaret wore an expression of feigned distress. "Emily, something terrible happened. Shadow got away. He saw a cat and pulled the leash right out of my hand. I couldn't hold on. The clinic staff are already searching the area." Emily's reaction was devastating. The girl screamed Shadow's name over and over, calling for her faithful companion until her voice gave out. Margaret hugged her, genuine tears now streaming down her face, not for the lie about the dog's disappearance, but for the pain she had caused her own granddaughter. "We have to find him, Grandma," Emily pleaded, clutching her grandmother's clothes. "He doesn't know the way back. He'll get lost. He could get hit by a car." The clinic staff, confused by the situation, but sympathetic to the distraught girl, quickly organized a search of the surrounding area. One of the receptionists even called nearby animal shelters, asking about a black Labrador with a guide dog vest. Margaret, consumed by guilt as she watched her granddaughter's suffering, almost confessed the truth right then. The words were on the tip of her tongue, ready to spill out, but then Emily lifted her tear-streaked face toward her. "Grandma, you always said God has a plan for everything. Why would he take my eyes and now my dog too? Is this some kind of test? What did I do wrong?" The innocent, heartbreaking question sealed Margaret's lips. How could she explain that it wasn't God, but her own grandmother who had inflicted this new pain? How could she admit she had betrayed her granddaughter's trust so cruelly? Margaret hugged Emily tighter, her comforting words sounding hollow even to her own ears. "We'll find him, sweetheart. I'm sure we will." In the weeks that followed, Emily's life plunged back into darkness, this time not just physically but emotionally. The girl refused to leave the house, rejected the cane, and begged daily for them to keep searching for Shadow. "He'll come back, Mom. I know he will. Shadow would never abandon me," Emily repeated with a conviction that broke Jennifer's heart. Jennifer mobilized neighbors, put up posters around town, offered a reward, and contacted animal shelters and local veterinarians. Nothing. Shadow had vanished without a trace. "It doesn't make sense, Mom," Shadow was trained not to wander off. Even if he chased a cat, he'd return to the clinic. Guide dogs are trained for that, Jennifer remarked one night after putting Emily to bed. Margaret looked away, unable to meet her daughter's gaze. Sometimes animals get lost, Jennifer. Maybe someone found him and decided to keep him. I suspect there's something you're not telling me, Jennifer pressed, watching her mother's reactions closely. Don't be absurd, Margaret defended herself, more forcefully than the situation warranted. Do you really think I'd do anything to hurt Emily? Jennifer didn't respond, but the seed of suspicion was planted. There was something about her mother's exaggerated reaction, the way she avoided eye contact, that raised her suspicions. Jennifer had always had sharp intuition, especially when it came to her mother. Years of living together had taught her to recognize the subtle tics and changes in Margaret's voice that signaled she was hiding something. In the days that followed, Jennifer began a quiet investigation. She meticulously reviewed the day of Shadow's disappearance, questioning clinic staff, searching for security cameras nearby, and tracking the dog's microchip in national systems. The lack of any concrete leads frustrated her deeply. Still looking for that dog? Margaret asked during one of her visits, trying to sound casual as she helped prepare dinner. I'll never stop looking, Mum. Emily needs him. The silence that followed was heavy with unspoken tension. Margaret began washing the dishes more vigorously than necessary, the clatter of plates echoing through the kitchen. Sometimes we have to accept loss and move on, Margaret murmured without turning around. That's life. We don't always get what we want. It's curious, Mom, Jennifer replied slowly. You seem so determined to convince Emily to forget Shadow, almost as if you know it's pointless to keep searching. Margaret let a plate slip through her fingers, shattering on the kitchen floor. Her trembling hands and suddenly pale face only confirmed Jennifer's suspicions. Meanwhile in San Diego, Shadow was adjusting to his new family. David and Susan watched in amazement as the Labrador transformed their son, Ethan's life. The sea boy, who had completely withdrawn after losing his sight, was now taking his first steps toward reclaiming his independence, always with Shadow guiding his movements. It's like he was born for this, Susan remarked one evening, watching Ethan sleep with his head resting on Shadow's black fur. David nodded, but a lingering unease stayed with him. Don't you think it's strange that woman just gave us a trained guide dog? These animals cost a fortune and go through years of training. She said it was for her granddaughter's sake. Yes, but something about this story doesn't sit right with me. As a precaution, David had changed the dog's name to Buddy, to prevent him from responding to his old name if they ever crossed paths with someone who knew him. But despite all the care, it was clear something was bothering the animal. Buddy, as he was now called, would spend long periods staring out the window as if waiting for someone. Dear listener, if you're enjoying the story, please take a moment to like and especially subscribe to the channel. It helps us a lot as we're just starting out. Now continuing. 2 years had passed since Shadow's disappearance, and Emily, now 12, had finally accepted using her cane regularly, though she still kept Shadow's collar under her pillow every night. He's still going to come back, Mom, I can feel it, she'd say occasionally, though less often than before. Michael, Emily's father, had returned to town after learning about his daughter's accident and the loss of her guide dog. Though he couldn't be there full-time due to his professional commitments as a musician, he now visited Emily more regularly and tried to find ways to reconnect with her. His return stirred mixed feelings in Jennifer. Seeing her ex-husband trying to make up for years of absence with just a few weeks of intense attention brought both gratitude and resentment. Part of her appreciated Michael's effort, especially for Emily's sake, but another part wondered where this dedication had been when their daughter was little and needed her father's constant presence. I thought you might like this, he said one Saturday afternoon, guiding Emily's hands to an electronic keyboard he'd brought. Music has been my companion through the hardest times in my life. Maybe it can help you too. Emily's face lit up as she touched the smooth keys. There was something about the sound, the vibration she felt in her fingers, that immediately sparked her interest. Is this a keyboard, Dad? A digital piano, actually. I thought it'd be more practical to start with. If you like it, I can take you to the studio where I rehearse. There's a grand piano there." Emily hesitantly pressed the keys, producing random notes. "I don't know how to play, Dad." "No one does until they learn," Michael replied gently. "I can teach you if you'd like." Jennifer watched from the bedroom door, her heart torn. On one hand, she was happy to see her daughter showing interest in something new. On the other, she couldn't help but feel a pang of jealousy at the bond forming between father and daughter through music, something she couldn't offer. "Do you think I can really learn without seeing?" Emily asked uncertainly. "Did you know one of the greatest pianists of all time, Stevie Wonder, was also blind?" Michael answered. "Music doesn't need eyes, Emily. It needs attentive ears and an open heart." To everyone's surprise, Emily showed a natural talent for music. Her small hands glided over the keys with growing confidence, and her ability to memorize melodies was impressive. Amazed by his daughter's gift, Michael began bringing Braille sheet music and hiring teachers specialized in teaching music to the visually impaired. "She has perfect pitch," one teacher remarked after a few lessons. "It's a rare gift, even among sighted musicians." During these lessons, Jennifer noticed something intriguing. Whenever Emily played, her compositions had a recurring theme, a sequence of notes that seemed to tell a story of searching and waiting. When asked about it, Emily just smiled sadly. "It's Shadow's song, Mum, so he can find me when he hears it." Music became Emily's new world, a universe where her blindness wasn't an obstacle. She spent hours practicing, learning classics, and eventually began composing her own melodies. "How do you create such beautiful music?" Jennifer once asked, moved after hearing a particularly touching piece. "I turn feelings into sounds, Mom," Emily replied simply. "When I miss Shadow, I imagine what the sound of his footsteps guiding me would be like, the noise of his breathing near me when we slept together, the sound of his tail wagging when he was happy. And that becomes music." In San Diego, life went on as usual. Ethan and Buddy had become inseparable, but David and Susan noticed that as time passed, the dog's behavior grew more melancholy. The vet found nothing physically wrong with him, but his energy seemed to fade gradually. "I don't think we should have ever taken this dog," David confessed one night after Ethan went to bed. "I can't stop thinking about the girl who lost him." "But look how much he's helped our son, David." Ethan was depressed before Buddy came along. "I know, but at the cost of another child's pain. That doesn't seem fair to me." The conversation was interrupted by a phone call. It was Susan's father, who had suffered a heart attack and was hospitalized in Denver. The family had to rush there, and since they couldn't take Buddy with them, they left the dog temporarily in the care of a friend's couple who lived in Oceanside, a neighboring town to San Diego. Richard and Jessica Williams took Buddy into their home but quickly noticed the dog was restless, unlike what they'd expect from a well-trained guide dog. "He seems anxious all the time," Jessica told her husband. "He keeps looking out the window like he's waiting for someone." David mentioned he's always been like that. "I think it might have something to do with his previous training." A week after taking Buddy in, the dog seized a moment of distraction when the door was opened for a package delivery and ran away. Richard and Jessica spent days searching for him, placing ads in local papers and on social media, but the Labrador had vanished completely. "How are we going to tell David and Susan? That dog is so important to their son," Jessica lamented, devastated. When David and Susan returned from Denver and learned of Buddy's disappearance, the news came as a shock. Ethan, who had formed a deep bond with the dog, fell into profound sadness. "He'll come back, won't he?" the boy kept asking, in a heartbreaking echo of what had happened to Emily 2 years earlier. David and Susan exchanged anguished glances over their son's head. The guilt David had carried since the day they accepted the dog from Margaret now weighed even heavier. "We'll do everything to find him, son," David promised, though he knew the chances were slim. That night, after putting Ethan to bed, David finally confessed to Susan the doubts that had haunted him for 2 years. "I think I need to find that family, the girl who was Buddy's real owner, or Shadow as he was called." "Why, David?" "That'll only bring more pain for everyone," Susan argued. "I can't explain it. I feel like there's something unfinished in this story. That woman, the girl's grandmother, there was something odd about how she handed the dog over to us. You think she didn't have the right to do it? Susan asked, suddenly alarmed. I don't know, but I think we should have asked more questions. David stayed up all night, rummaging through drawers until he found what he was looking for. Shadow's original vaccination record, with the name and address of the vet in Greenfield. It was a slim lead, but it was a start. He decided that once the search for Buddy proved fruitless, he'd travel to the town to investigate. Fate, however, had charted an unexpected path for Shadow, or Buddy, as he was now known. The Labrador, guided by an instinct that defied explanation, had begun an epic journey. Not knowing exactly where to go, simply following an inner calling, the dog began his journey, surviving thanks to the kindness of people he met along the way, who offered him food and temporary shelter. Shadow's journey was fraught with dangers. Busy roads, open fields, dense forests, and rushing rivers stood between him and his unknown destination. His survival instinct, combined with his exceptional training, allowed him to navigate these obstacles, but not without cost. After weeks on the road, his once shiny coat was dull and tangled, his paw pads bruised by hot asphalt and sharp stones, and his once strong body showed signs of hunger and constant exertion. Yet Shadow pressed on, guided by a scent memory and a loyalty that transcended human understanding. In his world dominated by smells and sounds, he searched for one specific aroma, a particular tone of voice, the gentle touch of small hands that had been his first true home. Back in Greenfield, Emily, now 13, had become a talented pianist. Her music teacher, Sarah Thompson, had organized a small recital at school, where Emily would perform her original compositions for the first time in front of an audience beyond her family. I'm nervous, miss, Emily confessed during the final rehearsal. It's natural, dear, but your music has soul, it has feeling. People will be moved. I'm playing a special piece today. I wrote it for Shadow. Sarah smiled tenderly. Though Emily rarely spoke of the lost dog now, it was clear the pain of separation still lingered. What's the name of the composition? Waiting for Reunion, Emily replied with a faint smile, because in my heart I still believe we'll meet again someday. The recital was an absolute success. When Emily played her piece dedicated to Shadow, not a single eye in the school auditorium remained dry. The emotion conveyed through the notes was palpable, telling a story of love, loss, and eternal hope. One of the teachers present, deeply moved by the performance, recorded Emily's piece and, with Jennifer's permission, shared the video on social media, along with the story of the young blind pianist and her missing guide dog. Emily Parker lost her sight at age 10 after an accident. Her guide dog, Shadow, mysteriously disappeared over 2 years ago, but she never lost hope of finding him again. Today, she played this heartfelt composition dedicated to her four-legged friend. The video quickly went viral, touching the hearts of thousands. Messages of support and hope flooded the post, which was shared by celebrities and animal advocacy pages alike. By one of life's inexplicable coincidences, the video reached Amanda Miller, a veterinarian in Riverside, a neighboring town to Greenfield. Something about the dog's description and the story reminded her of a Labrador she had recently treated. The dog had been found wandering along the road by a truck driver and showed signs of exhaustion and dehydration, but had no identification. Daniel, do you remember that black Labrador we treated last week? Amanda asked her husband and clinic partner. The one the truck driver brought in? Yes, he's doing much better now. We're trying to find him a home. I just saw a video. A blind girl from Greenfield lost her guide dog 2 years ago. The description matches. Amanda, there must be hundreds of missing black labs in the country. What are the odds it's the same one? I don't know, but I want to check if he has a microchip. Guide dog certification requires one. Daniel sighed. All right, let's check. But don't get your hopes up too high. To the surprise of both, the scan revealed that the animal did indeed have a microchip. After checking the National Registry, the confirmation came. This was Shadow, the guide dog registered under Emily Parker's name. My God, Daniel, it's really him, exclaimed Amanda, barely containing her emotion. We need to contact this family immediately. Daniel, always the more cautious of the two, placed a hand on his wife's shoulder. "Let's take it slow. This dog traveled hundreds of miles to get here. It would be cruel to raise false hopes if there's been some mistake." "There's no mistake, Daniel. The microchip doesn't lie. And did you see his reaction when I showed him the video of the girl playing piano?" Amanda had noticed how the Labrador perked up his ears and focused all his attention on the screen when the sound of Emily's music filled the exam room. He recognized her voice. "I'm sure of it." Amanda spent the night researching more about Emily Parker. She found other videos of the young pianist, local news stories about her history, and finally a contact number through the music school where she studied. The next morning, she took several deep breaths before making the call. As a veterinarian, she had witnessed countless emotional reunions between lost pets and their owners, but something about this particular case touched her heart in a special way. In Greenfield, the phone rang in Jennifer's home. A call from a veterinarian in Riverside claiming to have found Shadow seemed too surreal to be true. "How can I be sure it's really him?" Jennifer asked, afraid to raise false hopes for Emily. "The microchip confirms his identity, ma'am. Plus, he responds to the name Shadow. When we call him, he immediately perks up his ears and wags his tail." Jennifer asked for more details: size, weight, any distinctive marks or scars. Every answer Amanda gave matched her memories of Shadow perfectly. Still, after so many years and false leads, it was hard to believe. "There's something else?" Amanda added hesitantly. "I showed him a video of your daughter playing piano. His reaction was extraordinary. I've never seen anything like it." He practically pressed himself against the screen, trying to reach her through the video. "I know it might sound strange, but I'm certain he recognized her." That detail finally convinced Jennifer. No one but her knew how Shadow always reacted when Emily played piano at home. He would lie beside the instrument, head resting on his paws, in a pose of reverent attention reserved only for the girl's musical moments. Jennifer felt her heart race. After all this time, could Shadow really have returned? "Don't tell Emily anything yet," she asked Amanda. "I want to be absolutely sure before giving her this news." Jennifer decided to go alone to the veterinary clinic in Riverside. When she arrived, she was led to the kennel where Shadow was kept. The moment the Labrador saw her, his reaction left no doubt. This was indeed Shadow. The dog recognized Jennifer immediately, jumping and barking with joy. "It's him! It's really him!" Jennifer confirmed through tears, hugging the animal. "How is this possible? Where has he been all this time?" "We're not entirely sure, but judging by his condition when he arrived, he seems to have traveled a long distance. These animals have incredible memory and sense of direction. I need to tell my daughter." She never lost hope of finding him. As Jennifer prepared the surprise for Emily, Margaret faced her own inner torment. The sudden success of Emily's video had brought the full weight of her guilt to the surface. For 2 years she had carried the secret of Shadow's true fate, watching her granddaughter's suffering and lying to her own daughter. The news that a similar Labrador had been found in Riverside filled her with panic and, at the same time, a strange sense of relief. One night, unable to bear the weight of her conscience any longer, Margaret went to Jennifer's house. Emily was already asleep, allowing for a heartfelt conversation between mother and daughter. "Jennifer, I need to tell you something," Margaret began, her voice trembling. "About Shadow." "What about him, Mom?" Jennifer asked, confused. "He didn't run away that day at the clinic," Margaret confessed, lowering her eyes. I gave him to a family in San Diego, a couple with a blind son." The silence that followed was deafening. Jennifer stared at her mother as if she were a stranger. "You did what?" she finally whispered, disbelieving. "I thought I was doing what was best for Emily. She was so dependent on him. She wasn't developing other skills." The excuses sounded hollow now, even to Margaret. "I regretted it the moment I saw her pain, but it was too late. I didn't know how to contact the family. I didn't exchange any information with them." Jennifer felt an anger she had never known before, not just for her mother's actions, but for 2 years of pointless searching, of tears shed, of a pain that could have been avoided. "Get out of my house right now," she ordered, with a calm that contrasted the storm inside her. I don't want you near Emily until I decide what to do with this information. Margaret knew she deserved that reaction and more. With tears in her eyes, she left her daughter's house, carrying the weight of her actions. On the way back to her own home, memories of the past years tormented her. Emily's suffering, the endless searches, her granddaughter's depression, the nights of crying. All of it could have been avoided, if not for her hasty, selfish decision. When she got home, Margaret went straight to her room and opened the desk drawer where she kept her most precious memories. There, hidden among old photographs and yellowed letters, was the card David and Susan had given her the day she handed Shadow over. For 2 years she had looked at that card daily, torn between the desire to call and ask about the dog and the fear that it would force her to confess what she had done. With trembling hands, Margaret picked up the phone and dialed the number printed on the card. After several rings, an automated message informed her the number no longer existed. Her last connection to Shadow's whereabouts had been severed, just as the dog had found his way back. Meanwhile, Jennifer faced her own dilemma. How could she tell Emily about Shadow's reappearance without mentioning her grandmother's? Betrayal? How could she explain where the dog had been all these years? Most importantly, how could she protect her daughter from possible disappointment if this turned out to be a mistake? The next morning, Jennifer woke up determined to give Emily the surprise she so deserved. Without revealing anything, she asked her daughter to join her for a special outing. "Where are we going, Mum?" Emily asked as she got into the car. "It's a surprise, but I think you'll really like it." Jennifer drove to a park where Emily used to play with Shadow in the days when she could still see. It was a special place for both of them, with a small lake and many trees that created a serene atmosphere. "Do you recognize where we are?" Jennifer asked, guiding Emily along a familiar path. Emily took a deep breath, recognizing the distinct sense of the place. "Waterside Park. I used to come here with Shadow." "Why did you bring me here, Mom?" "Because I have a surprise for you. Stay here and don't move, okay?" Jennifer walked away, leaving Emily alone for a moment. The girl gripped her cane tightly, slightly uneasy about standing alone in an open space. Suddenly a familiar sound reached her ears, the sound of paws running on the grass, a panting breath she knew so well. Before she could even process what was happening, Emily felt a wet nose touching her hand. "Shadow," she whispered, barely able to utter the name. In response, the Labrador barked once and placed his front paws on Emily's chest, a gesture he used to make when he was younger. The girl fell to her knees, hugging the animal's neck as tears of joy streamed down her face. "It's really you. I knew it. I always knew you'd come back," Emily sobbed, burying her face in the dog's soft fur. Shadow licked her tears and wagged his tail frantically, as if he too wanted to express all the longing built up over their years apart. His brown eyes, once weary from the long journey, now shone with renewed energy. His body, though still underweight, seemed to have regained all its vitality upon finding his true companion. The animal's instinct immediately made him resume his position as her guide. After the exuberant displays of joy, Shadow stood by. Emily sighed upright and alert, as if the years of separation had never happened, as if he were simply resuming his duty after a brief pause. Jennifer watched the scene from a few feet away, her own face streaked with tears. After everything they'd been through, seeing Emily and Shadow together again was like witnessing a small miracle. It was as if a missing piece of their lives had finally fallen back into place, completing a puzzle that had remained unfinished for so long. How did you find him, Mum?" Emily asked, still clinging to the dog. Jennifer approached and knelt beside her daughter. "He found you, Emily. Somehow he found his way back to you." The truth was even more extraordinary. Amanda, the vet, had explained that a truck driver had found Shadow over 400 miles from San Diego, already near Riverside, as if the dog knew exactly where he was going. The animal behavior experts Amanda consulted suggested that dogs have an impressive ability to navigate using magnetic fields and scents. But even so, Shadow's journey defied conventional explanations. "He heard my music, didn't he?" Emily asked with surprising certainty in her voice. "That's how he found me." Jennifer smiled, choosing not to challenge her daughter's beautiful interpretation. Who could say for sure what had guided Shadow on his extraordinary journey? Science offered partial explanations, but the bond between Emily and her guide dog seemed to transcend ordinary human understanding. Maybe it was, sweetheart. Dear listener, if you're enjoying the story, don't forget to like and especially subscribe to the channel. It helps us a lot as we're just starting out. Now, continuing. The days that followed were filled with readjustment and rediscovery. Shadow, though visibly older, retained all his discipline and training from before. It was as if the years apart had never existed. Emily refused to be away from him for more than a few minutes, afraid he might disappear again. "He's thinner, Mum," Emily remarked, stroking the dog's slightly prominent ribs. The vet said he probably traveled a long way, but with good food and rest he'll be strong again soon. What Jennifer didn't tell Emily, at least not right away, was about Margaret's confession. She was still processing her mother's betrayal and didn't know how to share this with her daughter without reopening deep wounds. Margaret, for her part, kept her distance as Jennifer had asked, but sent daily messages asking about Emily and Shadow. The regret was visible in every word, in every gesture. "She's my grandmother, Mom. I miss her," Emily remarked one day during dinner. "Why hasn't she been visiting us?" Jennifer sighed, knowing she couldn't delay the truth any longer. "Emily, there's something I need to tell you about Shadow's disappearance." With care and carefully chosen words, Jennifer explained what Margaret had done. Emily listened in silence, stroking Shadow's head as he lay faithfully at her feet. "So he never ran away," Emily concluded when her mother finished speaking. "Grandma gave him to another family." "Yes, she thought she was doing what was best for you, even though she was completely wrong." Emily stayed quiet for a long moment, processing the information. "I'm angry with her," she finally said, "but I also think I understand why she did it. Grandma was always afraid I wouldn't be able to manage on my own." The maturity of her response surprised Jennifer. "Do you want to see her? She's been asking about you every day." "Yes. If Shadow found his way back to me after all these years, I think I can find a way to forgive Grandma." The reunion between Emily and Margaret was emotional. The grandmother, consumed by guilt, could barely hold back her tears as she hugged her granddaughter. "Forgive me, my love. I did something terrible thinking I was protecting you," Margaret sobbed. "It took a while, but in the end everything worked out, Grandma," Emily replied with wisdom beyond her years. "Shadow came back to me, and now I know nothing can truly separate us." Shadow, as if understanding he was the center of the conversation, approached and rested his head under Margaret's hand, as if offering his forgiveness too. "This dog is truly special," Margaret remarked, stroking the Labrador's soft ears. "Now I understand why you never lost hope." Time, that great teacher, moved forward, healing wounds and building new paths. Inspired by her journey with Shadow, Emily composed a new musical piece titled Reunion, which became her signature at performances. The story of the blind girl and her loyal guide dog who found his way back after 7 years touched many hearts, and invitations to perform began pouring in. One special afternoon, Emily was invited to play at a prominent theater in the city. It was her biggest performance yet, and her nerves were on edge. "What if I make a mistake, Mum? There'll be so many people." "You never play for the audience, Emily. You play for Shadow, for me, for the people you love. The rest will follow." When Emily took the stage, guided by Shadow, the audience was already moved just by the sight of the young blind pianist and her faithful companion. Margaret, Jennifer, and Michael sat in the front row, united by their love for the daughter they had raised, each in their own way. Emily's transformation since Shadow's return had been remarkable. Her music, always beautiful, had gained a new depth, an emotional richness that could only come from someone who had known both loss and the miracle of reunion. The story of the young blind pianist and her guide dog had spread beyond the borders of small Greenfield. Journalists from major outlets had interviewed Emily, and her story inspired other visually impaired individuals to pursue their own paths in music. A foundation supporting children with visual impairments had invited Emily to be their ambassador, a role she accepted with enthusiasm. But that evening, for Emily, There were no journalists, no ambassadors or foundations. There was only her piano and Shadow faithfully lying beside her, as he had done so many times during rehearsals. Emily sat at the piano, and Shadow settled beside her, just as he always did during her practice. Before she began to play, the young woman spoke into the microphone. "This song is called Reunion, and it's dedicated to my best friend, Shadow. For 7 years I held on to the hope of finding him again. People said it was impossible, that I should move on, but in my heart, I knew he would return one day. Some connections are simply too strong to be broken, even by time or distance." Her fingers touched the first notes, soft and hesitant, like the early days after losing her sight when the world seemed to have closed forever. Gradually, the melody grew stronger and more complex, describing Shadow's arrival in her life, the joy of rediscovering the world through a new perspective. Then, abruptly, the music turned dark and anguished, the deep piano notes evoking the years of separation, the pain of loss, the darkness that seemed to have returned to her life. Some in the audience had already begun wiping away quiet tears. Michael, who understood musical language better than anyone there, felt a tightness in his chest as he recognized in his daughter's composition echoes of his own absence. There was pain there that went beyond losing Shadow, grief for all the losses Emily had endured in her young life. The music continued, now with a sequence of chords suggesting a search, a journey, Shadow's meticulous and tireless quest to find his way back. The notes grew gradually more hopeful, more determined, and then, as the melody reached its most intense moment, Emily did something unexpected. She stopped playing for 3 seconds, a silence that seemed to hold the entire universe, before starting again with an explosion of musical joy, capturing the moment of reunion. The entire audience held their breath at the brilliance of that dramatic pause, feeling exactly what Emily had felt in that magical moment in the park. The final notes were serene, peaceful, speaking of reconciliation, forgiveness, and the rebuilding of bonds that had seemed lost forever. When Emily played the last note, letting it resonate and fade slowly into the theatre's air, there wasn't a dry eye in the room. In the front row, Margaret tightly held Jennifer's hand, who in turn clasped Michael's. Emily's music had done more than move an audience. It had rebuilt a family. The first notes had filled the theatre, telling a story of loss, hope, and the miracle of reunion. As she played, Emily smiled, as if she could see with her heart what her eyes could not. Beside her, Shadow rested peacefully, a silent guardian of her music and her soul. In the audience, not a single eye was dry. Emily's music transcended words, touching the hearts of everyone who heard it. When the last notes faded, the silence, before the applause was heavy with emotion, with lives moved by a story of unconditional love. Standing, the audience applauded for long minutes as Emily bowed in gratitude, one hand always touching Shadow, her guide, her protector, her most faithful friend. Years later, when asked how she would define love, Emily would answer simply, "Love is like shadow. It always finds its way back, no matter the distance or time." The end. Dear listener, what did you think of this touching journey of Emily and Shadow? Their story reminds us that hope should never be abandoned. Share what touched your heart the most and where you're listening from. Don't forget to like and subscribe to the channel for more soul-stirring stories.